England Take. I'm your host, AJ Kierstead. NewEnglandTake.com. It's the Substack. Please be sure to go sign up over there. Get every episode in your inbox. Thank you to WKXL for picking up the show every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. NHTalkRadio.com. Also, big thank you to TheGraniteGrock.com and Concord TV for picking up the program every week. Have opinions on anything we're talking about here on the show? Email me, AJ at NewEnglandTake.com. Been getting some emails from people, which has been very interesting to see, and guest ideas, anything of that nature, disagreements. Love to hear it. Please shoot me an email, AJ at NewEnglandTake.com. Excited today to be joined by a first-time guest of an outlet that I've actually been a fan of for a very long time, as someone who previously worked in higher ed. I'm a contractor for higher ed still, full disclosure. I still do work over at UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law. But I've been very straightforward in my drive for pushing for reform in higher education. So today I'm joined by Zachary Marschall, PhD, Campus Reform's Editor-in-Chief. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
So at the onset here, what is Campus Reform? What is the mission of this outlet?
Campus Reform is a daily digital newspaper run by professional staff in Washington, D.C., that trains the next generation of journalists and media professionals. We have a couple hundred college students freelancing for us every year, where they report on leftist abuse and bias at their universities and colleges across the country, and they're able to get mentored by my staff of professional editors. We are a project of the Leadership Institute, which is a political training organization in the Washington, D.C. area, and we fulfill that side of the training mission by helping college students learn how to become journalists with reading, writing, investigative media trainings.
I genuinely appreciate that you're straightforward that of what the mission is of so
Yeah,
many of these organizations out there, especially mainly on the left. In my
yeah.
own anecdotal experience, they are not straightforward with this at all.
Mhm. No, and I think that goes to a deeper problem, which is that the left never sees their opinions as political, or they always see it as normative. They think that their worldview is the default and everything else is just kind of um, deviation from that. I think a couple of years ago, there was a list that a college published that we reported on, that said you cannot have political flags inside the classroom. That's great. I think we can all agree that's a good thing. But then the Black Lives Matter flag was on the list of acceptable flags because that was about human rights. I mean, it's just an example that the mainstream media, the left, just does not see themselves for what they are. And I think we would be a healthier country if we could all be just honest and upfront about what we're doing.
And genuinely, it's very important. It's something I think a lot more people are beginning to have their eyes
Mm.
open to. As someone who I graduated from college in 2010, so it was
Yeah.
kind of the beginning of it really going off the rails. And my generation has really been affected by the fact that it's when the whole culture is one thing and debate of people that are to the right of any standard Democrat is viewed as the enemy. It's a real issue. Like I had many heated discussions either in my college radio show or even in some of my classes, DEI classes that I had in my undergrad. We'll talk about those sort of things in a bit, but it really causes a lot of downstream things, whether it's the teachers we now have in K through 12, corporate DEI culture, and things of that nature. It's genuinely is important to make sure colleges are allowing both sides of all political, or even
Yeah.
not even both sides, just multiple opinions that are
Yeah.
more than just to the left.
Yeah, so actually, I graduated in 2010 too, and it's just nice to meet someone who's my age because working with college students, every day, they make me feel much older than I feel
Yeah.
I deserve to feel. So it's nice to meet someone my own age, um, in the wild. I actually wrote a editorial for Campus Reform about 2 years ago on what you just said. I talked about that moment we were in as undergrads in the late 2000s, about when the shifts started to happen and how we kind of, I think when we were in college, we were in this progressive moment. We were like, we were right in the middle of it when Obama got elected and he rode that college voter wave. And I think that's when we shifted from this conservative liberal divide that we saw with the Iraq War and the 2004 election, and we got more into like conservative versus progressive. And I think the left just ran away with that because it created a moment that the professors in higher education that had been there since the 80s with postmodern critique and critique as scholarship of American culture, of Western civilization, they're able to capitalize on that in a way they never could. And enough of the old guard was retiring around that time. So this very vocal minority became the majority. And that's the reality we're dealing with. And now we are dealing with a crisis of horrible employment and hiring and promotions that has been, 40 years in the making.
And it was blatant. I mean, let's put it this
Yeah.
way: as a personal example,
Mm.
my book I had to read going into freshman year was Barack Obama's Dreams from My Father, when we knew he was going to be running for president. Like, it was
Yeah.
literally the reading I had to do before
Yeah.
day one of school.
Mm. Where'd you go?
Franklin Pierce University.
Oh, I'm surprised it would be that liberal because I had a more
Oh yeah.
conservative reputation. Okay.
It's really
Yeah.
interesting. So, and that's what really
Yeah.
makes it confusing to have an honest
Yeah.
discussion about these things. So, Franklin Pierce, for example, they have a terrific journalism program. Like, my minor
Mm.
was in mass communications, focused in media production, and I was able to do whatever I wanted. Like, the Fitzwater Center there, I've had the director on my show a couple years ago, and I love Dr. Navy. She's great. I was able to do my talk show where for 3 years, from
Yeah.
sophomore through senior, I was able to really talk about whatever I wanted. But I was like the only guy that was doing any sort of discussion of that nature, and. But on the other side of the house, they're one of the leaders of I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she was a leader in the feminist literature
Mm.
movement at the
Yeah.
time, was like pushing the whole freshman level courses, the 101 level courses, to all be in this direction. She was widely respected by the faculty
Mm.
that were on the humanities side of the house. And I see it as, like I said, I work as a contractor for the University System of New
Mm.
Hampshire. I support it, but it's the same exact thing. You go talk about a few years ago, Dave Rubin came to speak to campus. Say what you will about him, but all the women's studies majors and the professors were out there screaming while all the business school people
Yeah.
were like,
Yeah.
why are you so angry?
Well, what's funny is that so I went to NYU. Obviously, at the same time you were at Franklin Pierce, and NYU is so big that you can kind of find an example of anything there, kind of like New York City. My friend circle was very conservative. I am Jewish, and I grew up in a Democratic family, but my friend circle was the tri-state Catholics, as I used to call them. They were from Westchester, Connecticut, Jersey, and they would go to parties and go to like programming at the Catholic Center at NYU, which is, I believe, it's the same church that's now on the news all the time as being this hub for Gen Z conservatism in New York City. So that's kind of the crowd I was with. And I remember, my friends were voting for McCain, which made them very much the minority on campus. But I remember people being more tolerant back then at NYU than I think the ones there now are. I think there was a lot of polite disagreements and like um, fiery, spicy language in class. But once class ended, it's like you turn a switch off and you move on. I don't think people know how to do that anymore. They can't compartmentalize disagreement in politics. Like we should not, no sane or normal person should be waking up every morning and the first thing they think about is like the political disagreements our country is having. Like we need to have more normal thoughts in our head than what we're having right now.
Yeah, I mean, people were genuinely
Yeah.
surprised that I leaned libertarian conservative. They're like, really?
Mm.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
there's good people on the right. Do you think
Yeah.
everyone's just evil? It's like, yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
They honestly think that, which is tremendously gross and inappropriate. You shouldn't be assuming
Yeah.
anyone's political ideals, because it should vary wildly. It's always mentioned too. It's just so hypocritical that, well, I don't fit within a party. Well, it works on the other side too. So yeah, I'd like to get into some of the meat of some of the things
Yeah.
that was sent to me with a setup to have you on the show, which I really appreciate you taking the times. I mean, what is a huge issue when it comes to higher education is the
Mm,
cost of these schools.
yeah.
It's tremendous. It's crippling for so many people because a lot of people are they're adults. I'm not going to say that you should get off the hook by any stretch of the imagination, but young people are being pushed into these degrees assuming that there's going to be a huge payoff in career and things like that afterwards. What impact do we think this drive towards these DEI
Mm,
and this kind of victimhood mentality sort of training
yeah.
that comes alongside with this having on the bottom line of these tuition dollars?
I speak to a lot of students every week as editor in chief of Campus Reform. And one thing I've heard consistently over the last few years, and it's getting stronger almost every month, is students, I think, have woken up and are now looking at higher ed and the bill attached to it as a return on investment or a value for money in a way I don't think any other previous generation ever has. I think we might have been the last generation to feel like we were trapped in that you have to go to this type of school to be successful or be like the kids you grew up with. I think that is we're moving past that. I think today's kids are and I'm saying kids because you make that decision in high school, not I think they're at the forefront of that, which is a very good thing. The problem is that tuition right now is getting up to $100,000 at elite private colleges, especially in the Northeast. And the ones that are cheaper are not that far behind. So we're now looking at like $500,000 for education by the time you pay for everything. Um, what people are looking at is like, why should I do that when I can just go to my state school and maybe go for free on scholarship? And like, isn't that better than having a fancy diploma in my office one day? When it comes to DEI, I think people are realizing that they are being underserved and failed by their teachers. They are entering the workforce completely unprepared to handle just the routine day-to-day work as far as like feedback, criticism, learning curves, just the normal like grunty first jobs that we all kind of hated, but we all just got through. Like they fall apart. And that's because colleges have coddled them and have taught them how to escape reality. They don't know how to face reality. They don't know how to look people in the eye. And I think on one hand, yes, Gen Z is a completely broken, lost generation, but I think a lot of them are also self-aware that they are. So I think there's hope there, and I think some of them are making different choices because of that. And when you get to like the DEI stuff, I think you can draw a parallel between what we're seeing with New York City politics and what we're seeing with going to college. Because in New York City, it's the wealthy, overeducated, silver spoon kids that are voting for Mandami and the people he endorsed in the primaries. The working class, those who need the leg up the most, are the ones voting for the practical, more establishment candidates. And I think when campus reform has gone out in the field and talked to students on their campuses about is this worth your money? Do you feel like the university failed you? It is kids, I think, from more disadvantaged backgrounds that are the most averse to these type of woke, if we can still use that word, classes and programming. They're the ones who just want the more practical, tell me what I need to know and let me do it as fast as possible so I can go out and work. I would say, I have been teaching students for well over a decade now, and I taught a lot of first year students who were first generation military, very, very poor. And they were always the most serious, most enthusiastic students ever. One student I had was insulted that white people would think that she is a Latina was couldn't do the SAT because she'd never seen The Wizard of Oz. Um, so it is it's the working class that is so disaffected by this left um affluential agenda. They're the ones who want more police on our streets. They're the ones who want the SAT back. They're the ones who just want to get through these hurdles so that they can go work out and make their own money. I mean, this is we're being undercut by this leftist fringe upper middle class sect of our country that's somehow taken over education and the media.
And this is totally a tangent,
Yeah.
but it goes off of it where historically If you have a tremendously overpopulated class of
Yeah.
people that do not have a way to utilize that education in a
Mm.
productive way, that's how you get the French Revolution. That's how you
Yeah.
get socialism. It's how you get
Yeah.
all these uprisings of people that don't honestly have never worked a real job with their hands in the field on the ground doing things that they're going to use this ideology
Yeah.
and this training for something, and if they're not able to do it in one way, it gets used another way. It's how you end up with Mom Donnie. I keep hearing all this rationalization of that election when it's no, the people that vote in the Democratic primary in New York City are going to be those highly educated
Yeah.
voters that are attached to the party. And as more, this is a systemic thing here where they get in power. You see this in Maine, saw this in Vermont. They get more
Mm.
power. They introduce more and more money that goes back to the people, as Bernie Sanders always tries to have happen, and then they become reliant on the system, and then they are inherently forced to continue to vote
Mm.
to make sure they're not going to lose all the services they've had. It's this cycle that it sounds really heartless to break, but it has to break because
Mm.
otherwise you end up with some tremendous issues that we're already seeing. Uh, I would still say early days of, because it has not permeated the entirety of this country, but there are some states that are just totally permeated by this.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. And this goes, to a few issues that are just need to be resolved on a more foundational level. One is I think there are way too many people going to college. Not We need to go back to a time when the few were going to college. I know that sounds elitist, but what have we really accomplished by having all these unnecessary identity studies majors in our country? Not much. And it really breeds the type of people you just described. We need more people to be going to community college, to becoming plumbers, electricians, to joining the military. We really need to destigmatize those alternatives to 4-year degrees, and be able to celebrate people who work hard and work honestly. That's what we need to be doing that, and that goes into these same politicians we're talking about, the ones who are prioritizing illegal immigrants over American citizens in terms of the benefits and resources they get. We really need to reprioritize all this. And there are some, um, things being done at the state level. There's about 17 states that are trying to roll back DEI more successfully than others. There's also one proposal in Virginia and Ohio we've been covering recently, which is trying to introduce more 3-year degrees, so people could graduate college a year faster. That's a great idea that we really should be spearheading across the country. Because if you do it in 3 years instead of 4 years, you delete the cost of college by about 25% right off the bat. And we need to stop. The higher education needs to stop thinking itself as like sacrosanct. They think they are like safe from market forces and society, but then they demand taxpayer money and they demand the benefit of like capitalist enterprise as far as like raking in the donations, raking in the corporate sponsorships. They're trying to have it all ways, and you can't do that. They really need to be able to slim down, be leaner, and be more financially sustainable for themselves and more affordable for students. And that looks like cutting things, not just changing who pays for what.
Yeah, definitely. Academia is guilty of the same meme of the government.
Yeah.
It's the bureaucracy that just takes forever to have any reforms. When I've let's put it this way, I worked in higher education as my full time job for more than a decade, and I saw the technology was there. Like it was there the whole time. It
Yeah.
wasn't until COVID that they finally went, oh, we can do synchronous stuff online, and it's not a
Yeah.
big deal. Everyone can do it. The technology, it improved considerably because of that, but it could have improved considerably before then if more people were utilizing the technology and buying
Mhm.
into it. All the various learning management system platforms and everything where you're fine. I feel like we're starting to see a lot more of
Yeah.
if your 101 level courses, your basic entry level introductory courses that basically you could learn in a month,
Yeah.
8 or a month, 8 weeks instead of a full 16-week core curriculum that we currently
Mm.
force down everyone's throats. And you're done. You get another course in. You can have the second half of that traditional
Yeah.
semester having productive Socratic education that, I mean, a lot of people would get in a master's program, but they would definitely benefit, especially when they're younger and growing and getting their brains wired how they
Yeah.
need to do. If they get used to the Socratic method of having that a conversation around a subject, as opposed to just sitting there listening to hours of lectures that could have been a podcast, would be hugely more effective.
Yeah. No, I think let's go even further. Like if you need remediation, you're not fit for college. It's not for
Right.
you. And I think we need to there's an element of shame, I think, and that's missing from our culture. When it comes to critical fat studies, for example, that's always like my favorite thing to you know, use as an example when talking about these problems because I'm overweight and I struggle with my weight, but I've never ever said that I'm oppressed by the capitalist system and I'm overweight because um, like someone else did something. No, I'm the one who decided that Carvel was on the way from my gym to my metro stop. I mean, what happened to personal responsibility? What happened to all this stuff? And have you noticed how critical fat studies has kind of imploded as a field since Ozempic became widely available? People didn't seek to find truth; they're just looking for an excuse not to do their own work. And the same thing with like so many people have gone to graduate programs to delay adult life in the real world. But you can only get so far. I mean, after a PhD, you're kind of done, unless you want a second PhD, which would be stupid. So when you graduate, you have all these degrees, but no practical skills. I think the people that use graduate school as a way to delay real life were never really meant for college to begin with because it sets you up to be an independent young adult. And if they're using law school or a PhD program as a way to stay in school, then they were never really meant for that kind of structure and independence to begin with. Maybe something else would have been better for them at 18. So I think we need to think more about people not always being right for what we think should be widespread. This idea that college is for everyone really has to go before we can really make any substantial changes and cuts to the sector.
Yeah. And I also believe there's a level of the I've talked about this forever. The
Yeah.
K through 12 education program needs to get its act together to make sure that if we're not producing kids coming out of the 12th grade ready to enter the world or get that honest
Mm.
higher education, we're just setting up each generation to fail. Like
Yeah.
it's not going to change. We look at the impact of our literacy rates we have in this country has been getting a lot of headlines recently. Thank God, because it's a real issue. And guess what? Kids got to stay back. We need to do certain things to make sure that the standard is. I was listening to a comedian making a joke of the standard shouldn't be to pass the grade that you didn't throw your desk out the window because you have an anger problem. Like that kid
Yeah.
needs to have something else happen for his education as opposed to what's happening. And unfortunately, a kid that has that level of aggression shouldn't be in the classroom interrupting all the other kids that are there from learning. And our public education
Mm.
system isn't allowing that to happen. And it leads
Yeah.
to a lot of these downstream issues.
Yeah, I've spoken to I think dozens at this point of grassroots activists who are parents in school districts, and some of those activists went on to win local school board elections, and across multiple states across the board, they're all saying the same thing, which is restorative justice, which is the fancy word for what you just described. That is what is really crippling public education and setting them up for failure. People care more about giving kids who need discipline and need structure chances to act out because they are worried about the optics of disciplining kids who are violent or disruptive or don't belong in a classroom, without some kind of like special ed accommodation or some kind of other type of behavioral accommodation. This is again going back to this, sect of America that I think is really ruining our country, which is this like overly educated, overly affluent, upper middle class white liberal that is behind this politics and of empathy, and they've weaponized empathy not to go from understanding how someone else might think and feel to, oh, if I say you must empathize with that person, that means you must agree with them. Otherwise, you're a horrible person. It's all foundational, interrelated problem we're having with how the left thinks humans act and should act. And that is now seeped into education, into our politics. And when those people are in charge, they create these feelings-based policies that we have to live with for a generation. For everything we do now, it's too late for Gen Z on many levels. So the best thing we can do is just turn to Gen Alpha, see what they're up to, and try to fix it for them before they get too old.
100%. And if anyone starts saying, well, it means you don't care about A, B, or
Yeah,
C, that they don't have a real
yeah,
argument behind it. Like
yeah,
that's the thing when it comes to all these discussions. They need to be population level discussions
yeah,
because it involves regulatory reform, removing money from certain things. Like it was my brain wanted to explode hearing all the discussion around the changes of regulations around nursing programs,
mhm,
which is it's a that's what it is. Nursing is a hands-on working with people program. It is not a
yeah.
doctor. It's not an MD. They're very different things. But we've got now this overeducated population of nurses. Sorry, nurses. I do. It's the nature of it. You have a master's degree doing nursing and you're still doing the same job you were doing before. Unfortunately, that degree is not being utilized. It's terribly unfortunate. We're setting you up for student loans for something that
Yeah.
your career does not really utilize.
No, absolutely. And not to put a segue in this conversation, but my second favorite thing to talk about after critical fat studies is asexual rights, which is part of a higher ed driven movement inside the larger LGBTQ plus movement on college campuses. I, if no one's ever been able to tell me what is a right an asexual person wants that they don't have, and what is an example of a right for an asexual person? Like, is it freedom from something if they're just going to abstain in general? Um, and I bring that up because it's an example of what you're saying with the nursing, which is that these things are so overly privileged that you have the leisure in the room to complain about these things or introduce these non-practical, non-real worries and topics into that work. Whether it is this type of DEI based um, language for nursing in the medical field, or if it's for the types of concerns that people are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to run DEI offices have to care about, or curriculum that needs to be updated by underpaid adjuncts every year to make sure they have all the entire acronym in there. Um, this is more about like a mode of decoration than it is about like skill based learning or skilling up where you are as a person. So if someone the fact that no one's ever been able to tell me what asexual rights are and what they look like tells me that at some point this is all just smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Hitting the end of the half hour,
Yeah.
unfortunately. If people want to learn more about campus reform and all the awesome work you guys are doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
They have a campusreform.org, and then we have an X account, Facebook account, YouTube account. It's all at Campus Reform. And for your younger viewers in Gen Z, you can check us out on TikTok as well. We just got on there.
On the Chinese app, you filthy shills.
Oh, the world is many shades
Yes, it
of
is.
gray,
Yes, it is. You gotta be where
unfortunately.
the audience is,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
That's how it works. I'd love to get off Boomer
yeah.
Book, but I can't. All right, Dr. Zachary Marschall, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
So be sure to follow the work that Campus Reform is doing. I'll put a link into the episode description if you're checking this out online. If you're checking this out on broadcast, please be sure to go to newenglandtake.com and be sure to check out all the links down there. This has been the New England Take, newenglandtake.com. Join the Substack. Feel so inclined. That's a good way to support the program. Throw me a couple bucks. Keep this show going. Big thank you to WKXL, local New Hampshire radio station, locally owned and operated for the last 80 years. Big anniversary for them. Go to nhtalkradio.com. Next up over there is going to be Facing the Future. Thank you to granitegrok.com and Conquer TV for picking up the program also. We'll talk to you soon.